For those of you who are looking at alternates to software that you've been using for quite a while, here's one option that I've made a transition to from your Adobe suite, your Photoshop and Illustrator, and InDesign alternative is coming quite soon. It's by a company called Serif, and the software group, a suite of products basically. You get them individually. There's no subscription based, which is one of the annoyances of the new Adobe cloud-based system. Yeah, you could get them for each package like $49 and pretty much get updates within the version number. So this is the latest version 1.5, and you'll probably have a couple more dot point something else that have come out since this video. But up until probably release 2, every update is going to be free, and then you probably pay a little upgrade fee. But it's $49 for Affinity Photo, which is the alternative to Photoshop and Lightroom all in combined. And then you get a Affinity Designer, which is the Illustrator kind of replacement. A lot of guys are moving over to these packages because they're basically not built with legacy issues, which Photoshop or the old Adobe suite sits with, because they've been around for like over 20 years. I've been using them for over 10 years. They're sitting with heavy legacy things. A simple example is the smart, what is it called? I can't even remember it now. I haven't been using it for a while. Smart objects, yeah. You know, when you bring in a photo and you used to size it in Photoshop, when you made it bigger again, all the resolution went out of the pixels. Then they brought in smart objects, or yeah, smart somethings, and they would retain the actual pixel quality until you rasterize them again, and then of course they lose that ability. It was a thing that they needed to do because of the legacy issues in the software. You know, everything was being built on old technologies. Along comes Serif, the company. They look at best practices, look at all the best top softwares, and start to put that into practice and avoid all the clutter and create different sort of paradigms. So one of the different paradigms is with the software. It comes with what they call personas. Like your liquify persona, your photo persona, developer persona. So and it kind of means what it says. That's where you go do your developing of photos, your tone mapping of photos, etc., and export personas when you're exporting the files. For some Photoshop users or Adobe users go like, why do you need these stuff? Why don't you just keep it simple in the menu? But trust me, once you get used to this, you think, why didn't they do it? You know, why didn't Adobe think about this in the past? But the purpose of this little sort of synopsis of the Affinity Photo is just to give you a few things that excites me about it, and I've been using for quite a while. When I say quite a while, it's probably just short of a couple of weeks now. But yeah, sometimes people get excited about new software and then they get frustrated later. But I've done quite a bit of research and looked up what guys have been saying and been using the thing, and I'm totally excited about it. Okay, just simple things. When you open the menu, you know, there's create a panorama, create stacked HDR, these kind of things. New batch job was stuck away in a menu at the bottom with Photoshop where you had to run scripts and so forth. And that was basically because of the legacy issues. They were building on and didn't want to interfere with the user experience. So Affinity doesn't have that problem. They're coming in totally new. All they're retaining is a few sort of shortcut keys and things that people who worked with Photoshop would be familiar with. But you could go set up your own ones if you choose to also, as per usual. Okay, we're going to open up new. Pretty much most of the things that go with it. There's a lot of deeper things that they've addressed and makes it totally phenomenal. But I'm not going to cover all of that. I'm just covering what a few, handful of tools that kind of excite me. I start off everything now as a transparent background, and I can add my own background in. So that's just my workflow. Simple here. It's only got a portrait button because it means if you don't click in portrait, it's going to be landscape. I mean, that's logical, but yeah, some companies will put portrait, landscape, portrait, whatever. So here we go. I'm going to put it in landscape. So there we go. First things, when you bring in an image, I'm going to place an image. Photoshop used to have a place and then place with linked and place embedded, and understand the logic behind it, but those are legacy issues in my opinion. So when I go place, let's find a picture. Here's what's different. Place would have put it on the whole picture, and then you'd have to press enter to accept it, and then, you know, Control T and proportionally size the image. Here it's giving you a thing to, you left mouse button click where you want to start placing it, and you drag out the size of the image. So if I wanted to do it here, I left mouse button click and basically pull it out. Simple, but so much better to work with. If I want to shift it to the corner there and then drag it out, it's with photos, it's proportionate immediate. It's not, I don't have to constrain anything, because it accepts that when you're working with a photo, you want it to be proportionate when you shape it. So logically it accepts that as the default. If I want to manipulate it, then I can push a modification key, maybe a shift key, and then it allows me to freely you know, sort of shape it. If I let go of the shift key, it then locks into the proportionate. Simple thing, but profound in its in speeding up the workflow. Okay, if I wanted to put it on the entire page, then of course I can drag it to that as such. So that's just a choice. But I'm going to put a bit smaller, grab it, and there we go. Okay, yeah, you notice I'm moving the whole area around. It's as simple as middle mouse button click, and you can drag, so you don't even have to keep the space bar down. And if you want to, you can space bar, and it will still do exactly the same, or click the view, which they call a view tool, which is H for hand tool, I think, in Photoshop. So yeah, I've got this here. So what are the benefits there are? Let's say I want to put in a background over here. Now I'm going to this rectangle tool at the bottom. I'm going to just click it, and it defaults on the triangle. If I hover or click on it, it gives me all these other options, and I'll get to that soon. Those are like in 3D editing, when you do parametric modeling, where you have a model and you have numbers you can put in to maintain proportionality before you kind of, you know, explode it into a fully editable version. So these are that kind of parametric editing things, if I can compare it to 3D work that I do. Okay, but I've just clicked and chosen the rectangle. Nice little dot markers showing me where I am snapping to those corners, and I drag it out here. And when I drag it out, you'll notice it creates a layer, and it says rectangle, and it treats that as vector art. Anything that's a picture, it will say image, or it will indicate it's pixel based. Okay, so I'll just take this and drag it down to the bottom. It gives me this blue line, and there we have a blue line on that area. Now, here's a very interesting workflow issue. Okay, if I select again the move tool, which is again the V story as in Photoshop, but if I select this object now, and I want the background to be something similar to this, usually I had to go to the eyedropper tool, select there, put it into the back, and do Alt backspace, or, you know, fill, or that sort of thing. Here the workflow is I select the back area, I then select the tool, and here it says apply to selection, and it says do you want to use a global selection, or just on a particular layer, or do you want the point size, the reference point size, to be 1 or more pixels when you take the sample. Now I've got the background selected, and look at this. I'm going to click left mouse button down and hold it down. Okay, can you see it's giving me a color in that area, and they will let go. Can you see what happens? I can even do that as a color. It's taking samples of those areas as we're moving around. Just lovely, intuitive. The other one is if I had to choose a sample on the color palette here, it would give me real-time feedback. If I go here, can you see when I hover through it? It's giving me real-time feedback. I'm left mouse button down, and it's giving me real feedback of colors. reason why it does real time here and here it doesn't do real time, it's because the image could be totally different in nature, and it first has to check the sample, verify it before it allows it to be dropped. With this, it's straight color palette, so it's easy to real time, and it just makes better sense that way. Because here I want to possibly check which color I want to go for, because it could be, you know, up to millions of shades of color. If I got that one, then I let go, I see the effect. Here it's basically, as I move along, it understands that it's referencing just a, if I could call it a straight on digital effect. So there we go. Okay, other thing is, if I select this and I want to create a border around it, I can do so. Where is it? I'm making these promises and I'm not too sure. Here we go with stroke. If I go to stroke, choose a color, choose a size of the stroke. You see what happens? It's giving me immediate feedback on the area. This is what I love about this program. It's, as you're dialing in the issue, it gives you feedback. If I want to change the color, oops, that is, I have to undo that. If I have to change the color of the stroke, oh, I've got to go over here. And there it gives me real-time feedback also. Okay. Cool. So that is some of the cool factors about it. There you get your selection tools and everything. And the other tool that I love is the gradient tool. Now the gradient tool here works very much the same as it works in the designer program, which is the Illustrator sort of equivalent. In that when you're working in Photoshop with a gradient tool and you work in Illustrator with a gradient tool, they work slightly different. When you work with a pen tool in Photoshop and in Illustrator, they operate totally different. I didn't like the pen tool in Photoshop. Yeah, in Affinity, I love using the pen tool because it's interchangeable. It's the same thing that works in the designer program, exactly the same with the gradient. So let's look at the gradient. If I go gradient, I'm going to say I'm selecting the back area and I choose gradient. Now it defaults on the current color here. All I need to do is draw my gradient, and it's going to choose the start and end point as the same color. There's one color. There's no rocket science in this now. All I have to do is to say, okay, I'm going to click on my start and I'm going to choose a different color. And look what happens. It immediately gives me feedback. In this side, I'm going to go to a yellowish color. And when I want to start adding different shades, I don't fiddle anywhere, except I know Photoshop has got, you know, editable things, but this is so much more sleek. So I just click on this line and I go to the color and it gives me immediate feedback. And then I can click over here and do a different shade, click over there, so forth. And then you have your little handles as to how the gradients are going to move. You know, and then of course how they alter in the whole greater scheme of things. Okay, and while I'm at it here now, here's another brilliant thing. If you go to the palette here where your layers are and you click on history, you can click through the history that you have here, or there's a slider. And look here, if I go back with the slider, I'm going right back through the history. So intuitive, so fantastic. You can see the effects that are happening in real time, so you can have an idea. You don't kind of have to, you know, imagine what it possibly is. And here now, Photoshop, when I wanted to go and edit the actual gradient, I used to struggle to find where the gradient tool is. Unless you do it every day and you try and work around that. Here, basically, you've selected the layer, you click on the tool. Just look at this, click on the tool, it appears. And that's how simple it is. Okay, then you have a couple of other tools, which is your Paintbrush tool, the one you used to, and it's got, you know, tons of other features, but there's a color replacement brush where you select a particular color and then you can take another color, and when you paint over there, it only replaces that and so forth. The eraser tools. Now, these tools are very similar to what you have in your Photoshops, but they've got some awesome tweaks in them. And like I said, I can't go through all of them because there's not a tutorial on every feature. Just showing you the highlights. That's the gradient. And then what other tool? Yeah, the one that you might not be familiar with is the in-painting tool. It's the healing brush tool. It usually works like the healing brush. So you have the healing brush, the patch tool, the blemish removal, and in-painting is like the content aware fill. So you have that ability. And then of course also if you had to do the content aware fill, you'd go to edit and you'd say the shift 5. When you do that, it automatically defaults. Now we've selected the background. It defaults to the custom color. You can choose the primary color. You can choose the secondary color, which is this usually in the back. The in-painting depends on what the selection was and history and so forth. So it's quite phenomenal. And here is the other part that I think you'd love about it. On most of these tools, you have a little comparison, a split view. So if I click here, you can grab this and see the effect previously and this one and how it is. And it works it with a lot of different options. If you're doing color grading on photos, it automatically gives you the ability to before and after slide along. And it's all these icons here. Or you could have mirror view, or you get back to your normal view. Okay. I think I need to round up now. I'll probably do 2 or 3 more things here that excites me. I'm going to go on to let's take this, we'll do this last 3 years, which is the pen tool, the rectangle, and the artistic tool. Yeah. Okay, so the pen tool, like I said, I never used Photoshop's one. It used to frustrate me. But here, and I'm going to just do a rough cut out of the area. And what you're seeing with the pen tool here is pretty much what happens in the designer tool, the other tool. Let me just say that if I want to go and do some Illustrator work, I don't have to save this out as a whatever PSD and then import it into Illustrator. Look at this. This is the photo editing software. I go to edit. Now you have to have both these softwares, of course. This button here is activated when I've got the designer installed as the separate package, the Illustrator alternative. If I click here, I've made it a shortcut D. Look what happens. It opens up designer, and if I go back to Affinity, that photo doesn't appear now, or that edit doesn't appear, because that has been basically locked out and it's been transferred internally across to the designer program. And the same works the other way. If you're in designer and you want to do some photo editing, you can do it in the designer program. They've got some phenomenal editing, pixel editing features there. But if you wanted to come over to photo, it'll also lock it out there and send it across. So now I'm in, can you see the tools look very similar here? I'm in the, what do you call it tool? The designer tool. I'm still having to get used to these names. But I'm in the designer tool and I could use whatever I need to here. When I'm done with it, I just click and I say, okay, let's edit it in photo again. Takes me right back to photo and I can carry on. So they're totally interchangeable and there's no export import. They just work by flipping in between each other. Okay, pen tool. Let me just go through this. Now I never like using pen tools for cutouts. I used to use the selection brushes and create the marching ants. But here, I'm going to show you why I love this pen tool. Now you can do it the conventional way, but I'm going to just go and roughly click on places. Okay, so I'm clicking through here and I'm using one hand on the mouse button here, which is left mouse button clicking and then middle mouse just to drag it. Okay, so I'm just doing a very rough one, but the reason why I'm doing this rough is to show you some interesting feature. Now I go just to normal spots and I join it as usual. Look what it's done here on the side. It's created a curve, which is a kind of a vector editing space. Okay, now the reason I do my cutouts like this is because of the editing feature. If you go to the pen tool and you click on the node tool now to do a bit of editing, look at this. If you hover over this line, can you see there's a little, like a tilde that appears underneath it? And that is to drag the line without creating a anchor point there or node. Now with Photoshop, you're going to have to go in, click on the pen tool. It opens up a add a point or subtract a point, add an anchor point, or all of those stuff. Here it's just this tool. So if I hover over here and I left mouse click, I can pull and it will drag without creating a point. So I go there, and here I see I'm dragging this anchor point. There's probably going to be a point that I need to pull up here. So I'll go up here, and then I can see, yeah, I'm not going to succeed. If I just pull, it's going to pull this down again. So I can click there. Oops, where have I gone on my click layer? If I click onto that, it makes a point over there, and from there it acts as an anchor point, and I can do whatever I need to. Okay, so there we go, and little smoothing around there. Turn it around. Here we go. Now I'm not going to bore you with all of this, but if I pull in there, and drop a point there, pull it out. So it's all about now pulling a line and creating the little curvature. Now I'm not going to be totally specific on here, but just to show you the beauty of the edit, I'm moving from these anchor points and just pulling these rounded areas in between there, getting nice little points from there. See, I might realize that I need another anchor point there. It's just a click and pull it in there, possibly click and pull it out there. I can pull it in. So you start to get a feel of moving the anchor points and getting the areas rounded off by just hovering over it and pulling down. Maybe this anchor point I'll bring here and then just create a little roundness there. I simply love this way of working, and this works exactly the same in the other program itself, the designer program. So I'm going to just click there. Okay, this is now rather bad editing out, but it's for the purposes of just showing you what we can achieve with this. Oops. There we go. Okay, I think I need to just speed this up. Here we go. Okay, we're not going to worry too much about here now. There's refining tools and all that works. This is just all about these nodes, and now we can smooth them around. Okay. Okay, let's assume we are getting to a happy space with this here now. Okay, let's take that around. Now, I know somebody will tell me that this is able to be done in Photoshop. I am 100% sure it can be. But just the intuitive nature of how it actually, the bending of the curves and everything. So that for me is one of the great plus factors. But here's the other part here now. I'll take this curve to above this layer, okay, because it can often affect what happens at the bottom. I have got this curve now here. What I do is I hit back on the pen tool, and beautifully what happens here on top, it says, do you want to make it a selection or a mask? If I go selection, there we have our marching ants, the Control Z. If I go for mask, look at what happens beautifully. It takes that and it creates a mask. Boom. There we go. Now, that can be done with Photoshop. Okay, forgive the things here. This, to clear it up and clear backgrounds, that can be used with refining tools and all that. That's not the purpose of me showing you this pen. The purpose is just that when you've now created a mask, usually when you create a mask in Photoshop, you have the mask and you only can work with the mask. The paths and that is on another layer, and to activate it again is a bit of a schlep. Here, once you click on the mask layer, it's able to bring back the actual tools, and you're actually then able to edit the mask further. You could work on the mask. You could, as it works, you're working on the actual sort of pen tools things, but it's actually having an effect on the mask because you are still editing the mask in real time. You have the ability to do that. So I think this is just quite impressive. And the other part about it is, if you have that as a selection now, you can go in and on the edge, you can actually, because you are selecting the mask layer now, you can go in and go do a bit of Gaussian blur on there. Now, I mean, you can do Gaussian blur on a mask in Photoshop, but check this out. When I go, it's able to do now I'm going to do it just excessively, just to show that. So we've got a Gaussian blur effect on there, but if I still decide that it's not working too much, oops, let me just go to the node tool. While I'm working with the node tool, it still keeps the effect. Everything in the Gaussian blur still has the effect on there, so I can work in real time. And here it's about taking the node and seeing the effect in real time, what it's doing. This is, for me, is quite phenomenal. I simply love it. So yeah, you see here you got the nice blur, Gaussian blur towards the background, and that's all kind of locked into that layer. So it is so much non-destructive in the way it works. You see there's an area on top. When we click there, click on that layer, say that area is too much, we can drop that down. And here you might not do an aggressive sort of pull down like this on the actual tool, but because of the Gaussian blur and the feedback that it's giving, you're making different decisions. That might look fine, but as far as the tool was when you were cutting out, it didn't look too fine. So, the real-time feedback, even in the 3D space where I do a lot of my 3D designing and that sort of thing, there's more of the feeling of getting the feedback with lighting, color, textures, and all that, so that you can see where you're going to, rather than working with a 2D frame and then rendering out and discovering you made one mistake and now you have to go back to all the start points again. So what this does is you are busy doing maybe a blend, and the actual tool doesn't look like it's doing the correct job because it's cutting it strange into the objects. But when you're seeing the end product, you're able to tweak it better, because the goal is to get to a comfortable end product, and the tool should help you to get there. The tool shouldn't limit you to making decisions for the end product. The end product should say, how does this tool work? So we can use the mask tool plus the pen tool plus the Gaussian blur all together in one. And as we shift it around, we have the look and feel we're working for. Okay, so I think that for me is the biggest key, is this real-time feedback. Okay, and then just two more things to go through. This rectangle tool. You have tons of options. Now, I mentioned earlier that these are like parametric objects. Parametric means they come in as the shape they indicated, but you can do certain alterations and still keep manipulating their functionalities. It doesn't kind of, in the program I use, Cinema 4D, you bring in a parametric, you can do certain type in lengths and widths and everything, and it will move. But then you've got to click on a button to make it editable, and after that you've got to now grab the one point and pull it out yourself. So it's similar in its logic. For example, if I had to use a pie tool here, if I bring that in here, it's automatically taking the gradient there because of the fill that we have here. But if we just go and we remove that fill and make it just a whatever other color, here again you can see the feedback, lovely. So we've got it there. Now with these parametric tools, when you make them, you'll see there's a red dot and the usual dots on the side where you can rotate and size and that. But these red dots have different functions. If you select them and pull, can you see they're having these kind of setups and functions here? And on top here, you're able to also do the settings. You're able to do these, and this is what parametric editing is all about. You can have a slider or a dial that can dial in certain settings. Here with the start of the angle, you can also do these kind of things. And I think this is totally brilliant. This is in keeping with how graphic editing programs should work. working with parametric objects. And if I'm happy with that and I want to edit it further, say I want to pull out a specific point over here, then all I do is my area on top doesn't give me enough space, my resolution, but it's popped out in this corner here. It says convert to curves, and you'll all understand what that is. But once you convert to curves, then everything else applies. You go to the node tool and you can start working, clicking on the node, start moving that. So then it becomes a normal tool that we're all used to working with. But prior to that, we can start off with a parametric. If we start off with a cog, for example, this cog has a few, and I'm going to just make the edges a bit thinner here so we can work better. But the cog has a tool here where you can rotate it there, the size here, you can make it bigger. You know, so these are parametric objects. So all of these will have settings on top here which you can type in and set in. Once you're happy, you can convert them to, you know, curves. I mean, not curves, but you can convert them to, convert to curves and then work as per normal. Or you can leave them in these objects and they'll just function like this when you need them. Other thing I love is this, the actual indicators, the measurements that it pulls up on the side. So if you are working with object, remember if you are working here, you won't see all these editable things. This is now your actual selection tool or your move tool here. If you want to do those edits on a parametric, you just click onto the actual tool. So if I click onto the tool, no matter whether say this tool is on crescent tool, okay? When I'm over here, when I click on here, if I want to edit, I just click on that tool and it will appear. It won't change to a crescent. It will appear with these particular handles that are on here. That for me is phenomenal. Okay, and let's just get to one more thing. Have you not found that when you're busy with doing a thing and you want to put some text in, here now I can go click and go do, you know, text inside the designer program if I choose to. But it's so similar and smooth between the two programs that I feel comfortable enough using it in Photoshop just as it is. So if I wanted to do some text, here is the one brilliant thing that I simply love. Usually you would go and you'd go select your size of your font. So if I click here, you have usually the art text tool and if you want to type in a frame. But usually if I select in here, then you go up to characters and choose the character size, exactly all that. However, here, because I'm working visually and visual feedback, I know the words are going to go across the top here. So what they've done is you can left mouse button click and drag, and it will show you the size of the lettering that you'd put in, and you go, okay, that size I would love to work with. Then you let go, and there you can say happy. Okay, there we go. It's intuitive. You can actually drag out and see the size you want to use. Here the other thing is also, I'm still in the editing tool. I don't have to go out and then make a selection and then start editing. It gives me the handles immediately, so I can start moving them. I grab towards the bottom area, I can move it across. So while I'm in the edit tool, the other beautiful thing is you'll see this red line popping at the bottom. It pops in the middle and it pops on top of all text. This is to give me an idea of where I am. So if I roll this over and I want to put in between the A and the P, I want to put something, I don't have to kind of click and hope that it's going to jump in there. I hover over there, and when the mouse hits in between there, I click and then I can start editing the text. This for me is phenomenal. The other thing that is actually quite great is if I do the frame tool. If I put the frame tool in there and I start saying hello, this is the frame tool. If I do that, can you see when I hover over it, it immediately brings, but here it's got two things. The one in the corner away here is actually to size the text, and the other one is to size the box I'm working in. Now that for me is ingenious. I mean, I'm working here and it already gives me editing features. So I can go and size the text box, because if I take it too small, you can see it wraps in that area. Or I'm happy with that, and I can take this and grab the entire thing bigger. So that's what I can do. and then grab. So it's just extremely intuitive here. The same thing is if I'm editing the line, the text might be, okay, I've got to make the text smaller here. So if the text is much smaller, when I'm hovering over it, I can see where the dot goes. There at the bottom, the dot goes. If I want to go between the M and the E, I hover there and I click, and that's where it is. And there are a few other features that go with these lines, but you can see the measurements. It gives you feedback and all that, all the real-time measurements. So that is quite phenomenal. The other thing is also, which other programs do have, but with your font choice, you go in there, and if you are checking it out, it appears on the screen as you require it in the text. It doesn't give you any funny samples. It just gives you the actual thing that you are working with. The feedback is incredible. But hopefully these few ones will give you an idea of why I'm excited about it. And the designer tool is also at another level. So give it a look. It's called Affinity, Affinity Photo, and Affinity Designer. For all of those who are keen on finding an alternative to the Photoshop scenario or the Adobe scenario, I think Affinity is a cool alternative, and pretty much you can pull in PSD files, Illustrator files into these programs comfortably. They come in as native formats. You won't be able to send it out as a PSD because of licensing issues or Illustrator, but they have their own built-in system. The other brilliant thing is when you save a photo file or a designer file, it asks you if you want to retain all the history, because you have all of this history built in, and you can save it with a file. So when you send it to somebody, they can walk back to exactly how it all was put together. Or you could save the file without the history. And when you want to send it, usually, I mean, when you save a file to be used on the outside, it's usually a PDF or JPEG or PNG file or TIFF file, whatever it is. So getting it in is important. Saving it as an Illustrator or PSD are not that crucial, because you want to use this tool now going forward. And my opinion is that this tool will start comfortably moving its way into graphic designers of the future, just because they have no legacy issues and they are really phenomenal in their way. And the company listens to the community, and they're building it up, streamlined, and efficiency is the key in this year. Even if it was just for this pen tool with the ability to add effects in real time, seeing things, it is worth it. But it's so much more. I've been working with it, and I haven't been fiddling back in Illustrator or Photoshop now for the past few weeks. I had no need to, and I use this on a daily basis. I see clients work on a daily basis. So yeah, I hope this has been of value to you, and share the good news with people, and I'm sure you'll get some more people interested in this great product. Okay, have a fantastic day, and God bless.